Nei ranga mihi nui ka koutou ka no hea au. Ko sa vai o le while mō toko wakahi, ko vai a toku maina, ko te muna nui a kiwa toku moana. No ha mo ahau, chihu! Ko whastauta me whangaroa o ku iwi, ko sali oa me maasina o ku hapu. Ko Aiono Tawhitara o ko Nari Tupuna. Ko e whakasa Graylan toku wharekarakia ara toku more hoki. Ko Aiono Pulumero rawa ko Awmasanga Vaiola o Kumatua, toko ono o Kutungane. Ko Loma Semi atu takutane e ngari kua mate e naenei. Aiono Manu Faaea toko ingoa. Nō reira, koe te tui e kete te kāka e kuku te kiraru. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. I always choose to mihi and te reo Māori. I'm a Samoan New Zealander. I classify myself as that because in my kind of circles that I roll in, when people look at me, they know I'm not from New Zealand. But that's just from, growing up in Aotearoa. I've chosen this particular whakatauki as part of my mihi and as part of my pepeha because they are the birds of Tanimahuta. And Manu, which is my name, which is short for Te Manuolo, because I'm named after my father's mother. And for me, these different types of birds reflect my personality and the way in which I actually interact with people. And I think when I actually critically reflect on it, it's actually how I choose to engage with Va and how I activate Va in the spaces that I work in and that I live in. So e koe te tui, being a musician as well, being a performer in church and lots of different spaces, you sing because you have the knowledge and you have the skills with which people want to hear. So you want to be the song that people want to listen to. My view of e kete te kaka, I'm a bit of a jokester, a bit of a clown at the best of times. And sometimes when I'm in hui or whono, where it requires someone to kind of, create that diversion and to help distract people with some humor, I can be that person in that group. And possibly also in those same hui or whono, they might need someone to be a peacekeeper, a peacemaker, and to maintain our eyes and our gaze on the kaupapa and the mahi that we're doing. And so I'll have to try and, help facilitate that process and help to calm people down. So this particular whakatauki resonates strongly with me because when I think about hearing these birds, it speaks to me as a musician, as a manu myself in my spaces. So this is also how I choose to articulate my obligation to Te Reti o Waitangi, that I live and breathe that. And I was very lucky growing up in Aotearoa at a time where the kohanga reo movement was just starting in the early 80s. And so growing up with a lot of wahine toa as they were learning their reo and developing that is something that I've chosen to take on board as part of my responsibility as a Samoan born in New Zealand. It's what I've signed up to do. So I try to articulate that as much as possible. My multiple perspectives come today to you through all of these different lenses that I have, and I activate Va in each and every single bullet point. I can tell you it's a very tiresome thing to be able to do because you have to really maintain your sense of equilibrium. You might also be the minority in the room. If you're in a Samoan church, and I'm Samoan, obviously we're the majority. And being a deacon in those spaces, having those roles and responsibilities, being a widow in that sense, different of how you connect with others and how you facilitate those spaces so that when you do relate to others, they understand exactly where you're coming from. So this is just information about me. And I know lots of you have probably stalked me online on LinkedIn and other places to kind of figure out, why should I come to this workshop and listen to this woman? So that's a nice segue into this next slide. If you can, on your own or in the chat, note down what your expectations are of the workshop and what you'd like to take away and leave with you. And the reason why I do that is because being teacher trained, I really like to hear what people want to learn, and I customize and tailor and personalize things so that when you leave a session, you've got something tangible that you can take away and use and apply and tussle and grapple with and just share that with others. So I'm just going to give you a Samoan 60 seconds, which is just a bit longer than a Palangi 30 seconds, to just note down your ideas. So you can record that in the chat or just on a piece of paper next to you. And I hope that you've done the homework, and we'll talk about that homework in the next couple of slides. I'll just give you 60 seconds to go through that, just to quickly write that down. And yeah, so Ali will also be keeping an eye on the chat for me, and just will be prompting me if there are questions from you. You know, I'm open to, if you have burning questions, and Ali will signal to me, and I'm happy to respond during that slide that we're on, or you can wait till the end with your questions. So I'm open to you asking at any time. So you would have received an email from Viv around, obviously I can't see your show of hands because I'm looking at the PowerPoint, but if you could just signal with your show of hands, and the team will see, I should hopefully be seeing a whole range of hands up there. And yep, I did the homework. And the reason why we wanted to share that with you pre-workshop is so that I wanted you to be prepared for being in the right frame of mind as we talk about the concept of according just to my kind of personal interactions and activations of it, because this whole va is such the word itself meaning space, but there's so many different permutations of it and so many different ways in which people have talked about va. So if you looked at the homework video, this actually stemmed from an article that I wrote in 2011, and this is when I was still a teacher. I was a high school teacher at Rutherford College, teaching music, and at the time we were given, we had this gifted program running in the school, and they wanted to develop Pacific identifiers for giftedness. And that paper only came about because I went to a conference in Sydney to talk about that through a workshop, and then I was invited by the conference convener to please convert it into a paper so that they could have it as part of the conference proceedings under the Indigenous strand. So I'm happy to say that this work then became the foundation for my master's thesis that I wrote, which was connecting gifted Pacific students with their musical talent. And I looked at how culture was our gift. A lot of the times, you know, if you saw in the video, culture is seen as a barrier to success rather than a carrier. And I think that's the mindset that we need to adopt as Pacific people, that our culture is not what holds us back. It's what makes us whole. It's what defines us. And however we choose to interact with that in that space, in the va with others, you know, is something that we need to figure out and have our support of family and friends who want to support us on this identity journey should be able to do. So here are today's top key questions, you know, and these bullet points. The reason why they're colored in that way is I use the principles of universal design for learning, which is something that it's about accessibility, using different colors so that people can see what's different, thinking about, you know, prepare, how do you prepare yourself to access that research mindset when we think about VAR, when we use VAR? And then this second question is very critical because it's, you know, why should we be explicit about the use of it in the spaces we occupy? In these spaces, we're thinking about our spaces in our homes. It could be spaces at work, with other organizations, when you go to meet with other external agencies or partners that you want to collaborate with, when you're wanting to understand more about engaging with Pacific communities. That's what I mean by that question. Why should we be? And should people even know about it? And if they do know about it, are they doing it well? Are they doing justice to Pacific communities when they're trying to engage with them, have them participate in activities that we want them to be able to do? Yeah, so those are just the two key questions that I'd like you to think about. Hopefully, if you've written it down, it will help you, because this is something that we'll be talking about when you go out into a breakout room session later on during this time. So when I refer to that phrase research mindset, this is for me what I think about having a research mindset is. You know, it's being curious, that you want to know something. you know, for Samoans, you talk about being whiapoko, it's not about that. It's whia I loa, maybe to some extent, that you want to know something or you want to understand something. So being curious about something is a key component, I think, that you need to have as part of your research mindset. That, and when you're breaking down the word research as well, for me, it's about researching for knowledge. Like you keep looking. So we never think about something as is, but we're always looking, is there something else that I might have missed? Are there other things that we need to consider to make sure that we arrive at a space, in a place where our knowledges are being honored, our Indigenous knowledges are honored, and that our understanding of what it is being articulated well, so that when people go to have the uptake of what we're discussing, that they're doing it that honors our Pacific communities, and then it honors what we say they are. You know, that whole, you know, idea around, you know, by Pacific, for Pacific. I'm a huge advocate for that. And that's because for too long and too widely, decisions are being made for Pacific peoples by those that do not have lived experiences with Pacific communities, and have no ideas of the struggles that our people face, you know. So even within this research mindset, you know, being open to unexpected challenges when you're going to find things out and it's not exactly what you thought you would get, you know, these are called unintended consequences when you're thinking about what you approach in research. And it's being open to, you didn't arrive at what you thought it was going to be. Why is that? And continue to be curious to find out what those answers are. So I'm asking you to adopt that kind of research mindset as we move through these slides today. There is a whole host of different explanations and thought leadership around the concepts of VAR. I've only just given you 5 bullet points there. When I do presentations, I'll only give you highlights, right? I will only give you the stuff that's really important for you to take away. The last 2 bullet points there, those are just recent research examples of publications that have come out. Rafiti's work there, it's only in the final draft, so he's asked people, don't quote him on that, but it's, what's really interesting for me in that piece is that there are things that you thought, but then they turn into something else. And being adjustable, being adaptive, and being resilient in those spaces is what has allowed our Pacific people to really corral together in new ways in online engagements. And that last bullet point is, you know, that's the current issue of the Waikato Journal of Education, which talks a lot about VAR, and Dr. David Fa'avai is here, and he'll be one of the facilitators in the breakout rooms. Most of my talking about today does focus a little bit on the first 3 bullet points. I'm a huge fan of the late Dr. Meola Amitua Naitoloa, and she talks a lot about that sacred space, and that's probably one of the most important things that I will share with you today. There is huge writing around the tāwā theory from Hufanga Augustino Mahina and Devita Kaili, and I will not even try to talk about what they talk about. And the reason for that is because it is so dense, it is so rich, it requires more than 90 minutes on its own to talk about that stuff. But I do want to acknowledge their work, because what they talk about, in my view, is something that's critically important for us to consider around how we navigate time and space, and the different things, the permutations that fall out of that, for how we can apply that. So I've just included that there to signal these are great pieces of work that are out there already, and it's just something for you to think about as you go and explore. There's a whole host of others, but I've only chosen to show you the 5 main areas of things that I think are important in terms of my worldview around VAR. So my own kind of publication around, you know, navigating the digital VAR space, you know, was working alongside Dr. Sonia Fonua, Dr. Churi Fuifanga, and also Janice Ikiwapasi around our centering our Moana Pacific values of what's important to us. So I talk about this notion of tautua, which is service. And the reason why I'm mentioning that now is because I now realize that when I talk about VAR and how I activate VAR in my spaces, I do that through the act of service, because I believe that that's the way that I can honor the sacred space that I roll in. So looking at VAR tapuia, these are just 3 main bullet points there around what constitutes those sacred spaces. So the sacredness is, you know, not to be thinking about this in terms of, you know, a religious kind of sense, but it's more about, it's the honoring of the position of yourself and something else or someone else. So in order for that relational space to be sacred, it's being committed to that, being in the moment and understanding that you give honor and respect to that person or to your environment. You know, that special awareness, and Rafiti's work talks extensively about that. So please read up on his work. But yeah, so I talk about Vātapuia in the sense around, you know, Vai Moana between the oceans, you know, Vai Maunga between mountains, and Vai Vau around in terms of the wilderness or, you know, grasslands, the spaces that exist between people, you know, our Vā Whialoalwa'i or Vā Whialoalwa'i, you know, that's kind of like reciprocity, and the Vā Lasi, which is like, you know, universe type stuff, vast spaces. But the third one there that's highlighted in red is hostile space. And I found that for Pacific people that I have worked with or have helped to engage with in terms of the community space, the hostile space is probably one of the most common ones that we come across. When I think about Vātapuia in that sacred space, you know, we hear a lot in the literature around, you know, this notion of te olewa, you know, which is to, people have talked about that as a way of connecting and to kind of decorate that space because you're trying to honor that relationship. But I look at this concept of tausiva, which I'll talk about later. But so looking at that hostile space, the vā becomes hostile because someone tramples it. And when we think about the reasons why people might trample a sacred space is, number one, they don't know the space is sacred. And number two, they're not sure about those protocols. So if we don't articulate how our vā is meant to be respected or is meant to be activated and engaged in, how will someone know that they have sullied that vā? Once you repair that space, that's when you deal it. And that might take a short amount of time or a long amount of time. But the key factor is it must take time to end where there is restoration or a whaalalenga. Probably the most recent example that we've had so far in Aotearoa is, you know, the Dawn Raids apology, which was an ifonga, the practice of ifonga that they used, which is the act of forgiveness and asking the Pacific communities for forgiveness for the time that those policies and that horrible period of time happened, you know, and that's when a lot of us were born here during that time, and our parents and grandparents were here as migrants. So when we're thinking about the whaalalenga or a restoration, you know, we can't restore things. You can't put a timeline on that. You can't force people to whaalele. So this is why being able to tausi the vā or tauhi vā is really important, because you can avoid having a whaalalenga or an ifonga if you maintain the relationship from the very beginning. So when I've talked about tauhi vā and tausi vā with people, you know, it's that sacred relationship that exists between brother and sister. You know, so there is that whaaloalo or whakaapa-apa. And so the role of the brother is to respect the sister. And there's the reciprocal relationship that happens, you know, the whaamanuianga or the blessings or tapuaki. And that's as a result of the brother respecting the sister then blesses the brother. So this is the reciprocity that is meant to be happening. So there is a common Samoan adage, which is ole i o mata o tua ngane o tua whine. The people of our brother's eye as a sister. And when I think about how we apply that concept, you know, in contemporary circles, we always call other Pacific Islanders or other of our Māori whānau, like, oh, hey bro, hey sis, you know. And even though we use that in kind of colloquial, informal terms, for me, it always makes me smile because it makes me think about this concept. It makes me think about this whianganga that happens. And that when we work in spaces where we work alongside other Pacific people and we have that understanding, we call each other bro and sis. For me, it harks back to this fundamental traditional view that we've held around that honor and respect and blessings that we give to each other in our family. And it does make me wonder sometimes, but because this is, whether it's being eroded or whether it's getting lost, or it's other priorities of how we conduct relationships come to the fore, more so than what we've had in our traditional settings, whether that then has an impact on you know, how do we continue to sustain that? How can we continue to tauhiwa and tausiwa if we're then kind of seduced by other things that take us away from the essence of where we've come from? Yeah, those are just some of the things that I think about when people should be sleeping. When we're looking at how we then, you know, when I talk about the pragmatics of our tapuia in that sacred space, it's like, even though these things are, you could probably call them Pacific values, to be honest, right? And when we think about our organizations and how where we work, there's a whole value system. And Andrew's already given us an idea around, you know, there's the Point England way. And I'm sure every single organization, school, center, community base that you're in, you also have values that you follow. And so for me, it's about how can you take those values as something pragmatic to show so that there is evidence of that. How can you see that? At MIT, they have this thing called living the values, right? And so staff get nominated by other staff members to show examples of how they are living the values within the organization. And that's an annual event that happens. There's an opportunity for individuals to be nominated and also teams. And I was thinking about, that's a great concept to carry over into your own schools and workplaces, organizations. How do you know that you enact opportunities for vātapua to be practiced if you don't celebrate the values in a way where you recognize them? You know, you think about when we used to grow up as kids, you'd go to McDonald's, you'd look at the sign and go, oh, look, there's the employee of the month. That's awesome. You know, maybe, hopefully it's someone different next time. Or, you know, I went for the food, not just to see the employee picture on the front there, but it struck me around, you know, how we value each other and how we value people, how in that other slide I talked about, you know, the va between you, matangata, vama, and other kind of elements and other things within the environment that you have that spatial relationship with. So thinking about these concepts here, you know, how do they resonate with you? Do you practice this at all? When you're looking at self-control, you know, in Samoan, that's called mio pulea. That's a really hard thing to maintain, because sometimes if you're not careful, that self-control just turns into, you're just a silent mummy at a meeting table and you choose not to talk. Because you're afraid that if you do voice something, people will think you're stupid, you don't know enough, or what are you even doing at this meeting? You shouldn't be here. So, you know, being able to articulate these pragmatics and to reflect them, to show them. How do we show them to people? How do we articulate them so that people can know for sure that you don't have to, you know, be a kumara and kind of sing about your own sweetness, but other people will be able to see your work ethic, what you do, how you maintain those relationships in a positive way with others. So yeah, so just wanting you to absorb that as you move on to the next part around, you know, what these would then look like. So when we're looking at the, you know, the covenant partners, I shared with you before about that relationship that exists between, you know, brother and sister. We're thinking about, you know, can we apply that? And Dion's already shared, Lefaoli has shared, you know, oh, yep, we could pretty much do that everywhere. But the question then is, but will you? If we know that there is a system or a way of being that exists that helps to honor other people, and then we don't use it, why don't we use it? What's stopping us? What's the hindrance there? I mean, shouldn't we be able to help others to be able to negotiate support more peacefully? Shouldn't we be able to adopt different mindsets so people can understand exactly where you're coming from? And, you know, and how do we help others to instigate that level of understanding? For the most part, the work that I do, it's a lot of mediation with others. And what's funny is I get mistaken for, you know, being quiet in meetings sometimes, but I'm actually listening to others to understand where they come from, so that when I go to respond, I can respond and come from a place where I've actually heard what every single person has said in the room in order to arrive at a consensus. So consensus reaching, consensus making is really important. And, you know, when you're delivering those types of messages, you're able to say to people, I liked what you said, that would work with this part over here. But maybe if that combined with what your idea was in this piece of the project, that would help that to move faster. But then we need to adopt what you're saying because that would help with here, blah, blah, blah. Number one, that helps people to understand, wow, I'm being heard. Secondly, oh, my ideas are valued because she's actually listening to what I've said, and she's actually extended the thinking further and included it in something that we can all be a part of, that we can all be team players and work together. Sometimes you can be distracted in meetings where it all becomes about your idea rather than what's for the greater good and what's for the best outcome for everyone around the table. I think that's something we need to really try and move away from, is that whole thinking around at all costs, my idea will win. Because sometimes that happens, but yeah, so just thinking about moving forward in this sense, how we make this happen. So I'm glad Dion's on this call, because we've written this article together around, the tautua life cycle. It's around, ole ala le pule tautua, and it's exploring tautua, which for me is how I've chosen to enact va through these 3 different spheres of influence. So, serve to serve, and that's, this is intergenerational, right? So as children, Samoan children, you learn about, how to serve others, and you understand that that's your role that you have to play, knowing when to serve, knowing why you serve, complain after. If you're raised in a traditional Samoan setting, that's, you go, whaipuki, mo kakale o mai, karima lo, everything. You forget self. This is why self-service doesn't work, right? Because it's about service to others, right? So serve to serve. That middle sphere around serve to lead, for me, that's the parents' domain, where they're kind of in the middle, they're kind of holding up both the grandparents, who are the 3rd sphere, which is the lead to serve. And with all of their knowledge, they'll then able to, if you see the arrow that goes underneath, the soalo pule arrow, and then from the children over the top to the grandparents, soalo pule there, which for me, I define that as, decision reaching conversations. And that in my view, what mainstream society doesn't understand is that we are groomed for leadership as children. You're constantly put on display everywhere you go, or you're taken where you're being seen by others. You are a reflection and an extension of the family. This is why we can never really fully be all about the individual. Our mentality is all around a collective, and that when one person succeeds from that family, everyone succeeds. So we're thinking about those concepts and how we're able to then use that when we activate va, that when you're in a conversation with someone, okay, I'm in the service space here. I'm just here to do what I'm told to do, get all this stuff done. We're thinking about how you can apply this concept of this tautua life cycle in different interactions that you have with people. And I use this as a way to activate va everywhere, at home, at church, at work, in social settings. I'm always listening to others and thinking about how to make that person feel better than when they first arrived to talk with me. That's always been a mission of mine, is to make sure that people always feel cared for, always feel respected and honored. But that meeting of the minds can only happen if you've created that space together, that you've been articulate and explicit around what va looks like. So here's a chance now for you to get out into your breakout rooms. You've got about 15 minutes to do so. If it's longer, if you require longer, I'm happy to answer all the questions when you come back. So just reflect on, as I said before, this has all been a very short highlights version so far. There's other things I could have said, but I just wanted to give you just the main things. But I'm relying on you with your questions and comments, so we can weave that through and make this as interactive as possible. So based on the video that you watched for your work and your thoughts so far, that second bullet point, share your experiences with the group that you're going to, and then in your group, please nominate someone to represent your group's thoughts when you return. I will also be in a breakout room with you, and so will Dr. David Fa'avai, Ali, Eliota Taisamaeli, and Viv Reiti will be there with you too. So this is the opportunity now to be put into our breakout rooms. And don't be shy, talk to people. If you find someone's good looking, private message them and compliment them, whatever you need to do, okay? So this is all about va and creating that space with each other. So yeah. Thank you, Ali. Let's get into those breakout rooms. Okay, so everyone should be back now from their breakout rooms. So just like to listen to 4 of you. So one person from each group, each room that we're in, if you'd like to share what your group talked about. That'd be awesome.
Because this topic has been discussed for so long, so many times, and it's not new. But I think from where I sit, like we have the Vāwhealoai or Vāwhealoai, the Vātapuia, Vānonofo. It's a whole lot of things. So it's your environment, it's where you are. Very interesting to hear some sharing in room 2 where we were in regard to Vāwhealoai. It's a relationship between the parents and children. Yeah, I'm not saying that it's wrong, but I'm saying because Samoan words, you can have one word, but there's a lot of meaning to it. You can translate it to so many things. Vāwhealoai to me is, this is your alo. You are facing somebody. So Vāwhealoai, you are facing one another. And Vātapuia, that's tapu. That's between you and your God. That's the initial one. Vānonofo is when somebody's sitting right next to you. So there's a whole lot of meaning towards that. So the word Vā can be translated to quite a lot of things.
Thank you. Room 2. Who was in room 1?
I don't know what room I was in, but we'll go next.
Thanks, Tay.
I'll call us Group A for awesome. I'm reporting back because they were all shy, but that's okay. We had a discussion, 15 minutes isn't long enough, just saying. So we could have kept talking on and on. But to a lot of the group, it was a new concept, which is good. But we were exploring things like the relational space between people, things like how the balance, how it affects the balance between the groups you're in or the people you're with, and how all interactions can have an effect on the whole. And a person spoke about how it's different for everyone that you meet. So you can have a different sort of relational space between different people. And then when you put everyone into a group, that's a whole nother different space. So it can sort of evolve and change. It's not one way of being. Things like who we are, that affects, so knowing who you are and what you bring and who you're representing. So representing yourself, representing your family, representing your workplace, representing whoever you're representing, and you bringing that into the group. The idea of being open to learning and learning from others. So it's quite along the lines of the ako principle in Te Ao Māori. Multi-layered, yeah, we talked about a lot. We're looking forward to hearing more. Aiono, Pasifika lava.
They love it, eh? That's awesome. I'm pretty sure we'll have time at the end, for more, so we can, discuss some more in a kind of plenary session at the end. So thanks, Tay's group. Can we hear from Viv's group?
Rufo is not with us, but Rufo shared a lot of really good stuff for us. I'm just wondering whether Siokihela, if you're still there, are you keen to share back?
Oh my gosh, I nearly had a heart attack there.
Sorry.
But thank you so much, David, for this opportunity, and please step in and fill in the gaps. But what our team or what our group looked at was, firstly, we wanted to open the VAR by sharing a bit about ourselves, which was introductions. And thank you, David, for facilitating that. It was really great to connect and also to see the different places that everybody come from and their workspaces. Secondly, we talked about VAR in our workspaces, and David, please feel free to jump in. We shared how prayer, how that can actually create a safe but a very sacred place for everyone that's in the meeting to be able to share. It not only just creates that safe space, but it also sets the scene, allows people to be able to feel comfortable, to feel that they're in a safe space to contribute. And as Pacific, Christianity is a big thing for us, especially in meetings. And if you want the boat to sail smoothly, you know, you gotta bless it. And so opening up in prayer is always a good way to open up the va between those that are in the meeting. Also, we touched upon the different VARs, and that was like run through by Rufo. And David, I'm sure you'll be able to articulate more in terms of what Rufo was trying to talk about in terms of the different types of VAR. Koia te malo.
Yeah, Silke, you did an amazing job. Thank you for taking the call as you know, as it was given to you. Really appreciated that. The additional things that Rufo talked about, and this is something very important, and you touched on this, Aiono, is around the ethics. That VAR, what VAR does is activate a kind of appreciation and an ethical practice that has to be looked after, protected, and nurtured. And if you really value relationships and your organization, then you need to pay a bit more attention to VAR and its way of activating. It's also not just about relationships with people, but relationships with knowledge. If you value Māori and Mātauranga Māori on this whenua, and even Pacific knowledges, then you will give it space to grow. Enable the people that know those knowledges to share and help you grow. I think that's what we kind of tried to share now in our group, but we needed more time. That was it. Aiono. Koilai.
Whakapapatu there, Dr. Dave. Thanks so much for facilitating that. And thanks, Seal, for taking the call there. Seal's probably freaking out, but awesome job there, sis. I'd like to take it to our group. Who would like to speak?
Gladly. Yep, great opportunity here to share. I was actually going to suggest Andrea to share her experiences of the VAR that she was talking about along with others, and being able to understand what that looks like from a personal viewpoint, what that looks like in a physical space, and how we view that, how we experience it, and how we can deal with that too. Because sometimes it can often be about what we're doing for others, but at the same time, it's what it does for ourselves as well. I know Dion had mentioned about, in order for you to understand the VAR concept, is to really be engrossed in it. It can't be something that's spoken of, it can't be something that is read, but unless you're in the trenches, for you to understand that. As our group was talking, I was thinking about the VAR space and thinking about, I guess for those who don't have that understanding, it's about being receptive to taking in something that's new. Because when you're locked in your own mindsets, you're not quite open to that space, quite open to that VAR. And then you often think that you know what is right for others without actually involving them and doing that. As Pacific people, a given is for us is that we're quite humble and we often show humility. And I guess for others who are not, it's not to confuse humility with being passive. And that's why we have that process thinking. We have that thinking around, it takes time for us to make sure respectfully that we articulate ourselves. So one, it doesn't offend, but at the same time that it educates those the others that are around us as well. I know that for the rest of our group, they're probably anxiously wanting to chime in to do that. But when I think about VAR, it's being able to understand that space because it looks different to everyone, but it's being able to if you're the majority, being able to humble yourself to include the minority, because the minority can educate as well. So we educate, and I think Ange just brought it up. We educate to not to offend, but to uplift as well, because we're a caring people. Alofa is a big thing for us. Tautoa and service is a big thing for us, and that's something that we carry through. So to my group, I hope that's some of your thoughts that I've tried to mash together for that. Dion, I got you, brother. Cool. Thank you, Aiono.
Cool. Thanks for sharing. And if we have time at the end, it's definitely open it up again for you to share and carry on the conversation. But just been really great to hear and listen to feedback from what you discussed. And there were some key things there for me around, even what you just said, Danny, about, whilst we focus on what we do for others, we kind of forget about ourselves. And then on the flip side in our group, we talked about sometimes you have to check yourself before you wreck yourself, because stop blaming other people for things, but actually think about, step back and go, hang on, what am I doing to contribute to this VAR that is actually being eroded? Because you're just so bent on, your opinions or what it is that you're trying to get across. So yeah, it's really great summaries from everybody. It's being able to listen to others, respect, having that sense of humility. And I really loved what Jennifer shared. It was a real hard thing to master. And I think it's something that is going to be a daily battle for people, because that comes from levels of, frustration around things that don't move fast enough when we're in spaces.
That will come towards the end of the workshop, not at the very end, but this Delano was really rich, and what we want to do now is open up the floor for questions that anyone may have for Aiono. If not Aiono, there's other experts in the room who shared around the VAR as well that you can ask as well. So yeah, so we're happy to open up the floor. If you're too shy to ask questions over the Zoom, you can message me privately and I can ask on your behalf. But yeah, so the floor is open for anyone to ask any questions.
Just with my experience of coaching adults, saying in that example we've given around handing over, when it's gone to its next logical step in the sequence of, okay, got to hand it across. It might even need to be something that's instituted ground up, it's from the staff level. I've always found that it's worked well when it's something you create a groundswell from the bottom up, so that they're already actively practicing it. What's always hard in organizations is when they try to get things from the top down, and they've actually got no sense of the reality of what that looks like in practice. So you actually need to get the staff together to talk about this, have a talanoa first, to think about that very question you've asked, and get them to feed into creating a policy and a process around what that might look like, and then present that to SLT, have some sessions on it to put it in practice, and whatever you choose to call it, that if these kinds of situations occur where it's affecting our Māori Pacific children, then, they've got to activate VAR mode, whatever that is, and then it's these kinds of practices and strategies that they're going to use so that they understand. So because for some people, they're not born with this, they have to be taught it. So that means they have to practice it. So they can't apply what they don't know and don't understand, because then they won't be able to see the fruits of the labor around the success of whether they've done that correctly for that child. Yeah, so the short answer to your question, it's going to take time. You've got to win the hearts and minds of people to understand that this is of value, that this is of merit. And if they might come back at you and say, oh, that's already called this in English or in mainstream circles, but then you insist, I go, well, we've heard those phrases before, restorative justice, but that's not entirely accurate in some cases. So there's some missing layers there then where we want to introduce is these concepts of VAR and the practice of it and application of it, the pragmatic stuff that we know works, because it's all based on the values, it's all around the Point England way. So I would actually start with that. whatever the school values are, get everyone feeling, because for us it's about feeling that you're part of something, a sense of belonging. And that patriotism that you have in your organization, it has to come from that. And then once you've got everyone with that groundswell of, yeah, we're all this, and then, okay, here's the next logical step is this, right? In order for us to maintain that level of awesomeness, there's some stuff that we need to fix in order to maintain that VAR with our students or with each other that we don't reflectively, critically think about. Teachers are so busy doing, they don't actually have time to reflect on the doing. And that's the challenge, right? Because teachers make over 2,000 decisions in an hour. I read something about that a while ago, that you're always making snap decisions all the time. And sometimes those snap decisions required time and space to allow the, other solutions or outcomes to come about. Yeah. So that's just my kind of 5 cents on that.
VAR can be expressed in numerous ways and in numerous layers of respect, but before any of that can be conveyed, a mutual agreement of reciprocity and respect between two people has to happen. So you have to build that respect before you can speak to them in their language about their ways of being, as well as making them woke to being inclusive of our ways of knowing and being. But in doing that, you've also got to tell them what the end result will look like. If you do this, this is what the result will look like. So anyway, enough story time.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Fitzoe. It was awesome.
We've got 2 questions from in the chat, but we'll go with one because we don't have much time. But got a question, regards to your background, Aiono, as a music teacher, and the concept of art and the research you did with students through music, and what are some of the key insights from that, and how were students, particularly Pacific students, dealing the VAR through music?
I got to tell you, I had some really funny conversations with students. So one particular school was in South Auckland, and the selection criteria for the research was that I only chose students who were, receiving excellence grades in solo performance, group performance, and composition, because I wanted to be able to look at, people that had a really solid understanding of notation, but also were really prolific in performance. And there was one girl who was from a South Auckland school. She said to me, the school thought that they were responsible for my gift. They weren't. This was just a platform for me to shine. So I don't like it when they try to take credit for stuff that I've learned from home and from my community. It's got nothing to do with them. I'm just wearing the uniform. I was like, whoa, So I just thought that level of confidence in herself to know that stuff. And she came from a family where, they were looking for her to be a role model outside of school. And she'd been learning how to sing opera from year 10. She just had a natural ability for it, natural affinity. And she went on to study performance voice at school, in a school of music. What I found, probably the main thing, is that my assumption was that those students who were Pacific and musically talented were very grounded in their culture. And then once I, collated all of the groups together to be interviewed, that was actually the case. That was proven for me, is that those students that knew who they were, they could articulate that through their performances. When they wrote their compositions, they knew exactly how they could apply their culture in terms of, how they could create their pieces of music. It's probably the biggest thing from those students is just their sense of knowing of who they are, and just their level of confidence is it's unparalleled. And the cool thing was that they were able to transfer that into other subject areas and be successful in those spaces too. Just wanted to share with you, the key questions that I had at the beginning are actually the key statements I'd like you to leave with today. So think about preparing yourselves to access your research mindset, that curiosity. So the reason I suggest that is, if you come across some barriers, keep thinking about yourself as a carrier of success, that you hold that space with every single Pacific individual, every single Pacific group or community member that you come across. You have a chance there to activate that VAR, to get them to where we need to be to advance Pacific people, to advance, Māoritanga, te ao Māori within Aotearoa. And we've already shared, even from all the gems that everyone has dropped throughout the session today, that we have to be explicit about how we use it. So it's first of all being exclusive about what it is within the context that you're choosing to share about, developing a process for that talanoa so that you can get that consensus, reaching consensus making with the people that you're going to have this relational space with, and then think about, okay, so moving forward, every time we come across something, this is how we're going to choose to operate to honor each other. Yeah, so those are just my thoughts that I wanted to leave with you today. And there's my contact details there if you want to email or text, call, follow up. I'm happy to connect with you, and thank you for completing the poll. The results came through, and oh, looks like I'll be seeing you guys again at some point, you know, so I'll leave that to you to contact me, but I just wanted to acknowledge Annalise Robertson and Ali Leota, Tai Samaeli, Viv Reiti, and the whole crew for your support today. Thank you for taking your time to attend this afternoon. Wish you well, you know, be bold in the va, don't just hold it. That's probably my last thought I'd want you to take away today. But yeah, whawhai te lava I manuia, tō ainga uma I awale pepesio nei whaamai. But please vaccinate so we can continue to regenerate our future generations of people. Yeah, malo lava.